Hey guys, Stobbie149 here, and welcome to my comprehensive guide to Battle Brothers. This is going to be a multi-episode series, and in episode 1 here, we're going to be looking at some general comments and mental approaches to take when playing Battle Brothers. I'm going to go over a few mods that I recommend you use. We will then discuss how to analyze the world map once you get into the game for the first time and what that analysis will mean for the campaign as a whole. Then we'll spend some time talking about starting funds efficiency, how to use the gold that you start with and get the most out of it. And finally, some strategies and some things to bear in mind into the first 30 days of gameplay. Within that, we'll look at quick and easy missions that I recommend you take on, some of the typical fights you can expect to get into with enemy types and how to fight them and how and when to run away. We'll look at the order that I recommend you take the ambitions in to get the most out of them. And then finally, we will discuss sometimes slightly controversial topic of armor farming. That is how to ensure that you get a particular piece of armor that a particular enemy is wearing, or indeed a particular weapon that they have. It's absolutely vital. It can be risky, but super important. Right, ready? Let's get into it. Right, so some general comments for you to keep in mind throughout your entire history of playing Battle Brothers, particularly when you are new to the game. First thing is, Battle Brothers has an inverse difficulty curve, which is to say that in many ways the game is at its most difficult right from day one until you actually manage to establish your warband of hardened elite badasses. So if you find yourself struggling in the beginning, that's totally fine. That's the way the game is intended to be run, basically. I well remember when I started that groups of 15 or so brigands with a mixture of raiders and marksmen. Oh crikey, this sound is one that I think if anyone who's played Battle Brothers for a while or made the mistake of fighting marksmen during the day have made will know what horror that inflicts on you, especially in the beginning. But with some of the tips we will go over later and proven strategies for fighting particular enemies, which I'll cover later, you will come to find that it's not that bad and it can be handled. So don't be discouraged by the difficulty of the game. In a lot of ways it gets easier as you push into the late game. There are different challenges, but a lot of the minute details and difficulties that you struggle with in the beginning, you'll start to understand them and it gets easier. My second point is save scumming. Now, I'm generally not someone who likes to save scum, but in retrospect, when I had started playing the game and was learning to understand the concepts and how difficult certain enemies are, I wish I was more willing to save scum because, well, let me give you an example of when the Warriors of the North DLC came out. And I had at that point played some 1,500 hours, but had never fought the Barbarians before. I had a war band of brothers. We were like 80 days in. I thought I was strong enough to take on some Reavers, but I didn't know. So, what the hell, just fight them. We got utterly wrecked. And I just loaded the game and, knew to avoid that fight. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. Eventually, once you know the game perfectly well and you know all the enemy types and you are able to judge your team's strength against the strength of the group you're going to be fighting, which is another thing that you've got to bear in mind, then that sort of thing won't happen. But long story short, save scumming, totally fine with it. Don't feel any shame in it. That being said, a number of my playthroughs, Season 22 earlier, are all Iron Man, and you can see some of the horrors that can inflict on you. It can be entertaining, but if it's just you might be driven mad by a 5% marksman shot to the forehead, so don't be afraid to save scum, especially when learning. Now, the third point is, I think it's a good idea for you to have a willingness to change and to experiment. If a build isn't working or something that you think is excellent isn't proving to be so excellent, be willing to change. And even more importantly, if you have a strategy that you are damn near convinced is the best way to do something, yet you are still struggling, be willing to look at other people's suggestions. I mean, this is something that I had to come to terms with on the front line. I look back on it now and cringe. I can't believe I used to take the fancy feet skill footwork on my front line of brothers rather than rotation. And my chat and the comments on the YouTube were blowing up saying, rotation's way better, way better, way better. I didn't believe anyone until I started using rotation. Rotation saves lives, and since then I've gone back and I only use footwork on my archers to get them out of melee contact. It's one example, but it's the kind of thing. Be willing to change, be willing to experiment. I mean, now, in my latest campaign, I had an idea in mind of how I want to level everybody with two-handed warhammers and cleavers on the front line, and I misleveled one of my cleaver guys and gave him hammer mastery. Now I'm considering building a new class with shield expert, hammer mastery, so you can use a one-handed hammer, and quick hands to use a cleaver. The logic being, what's the best weapon against armor? A hammer. What's the best weapon against unarmored target? A cleaver. So why not have both? It's the thing is, we can discuss that type of thing till the sun goes down, but the point is, always be willing to experiment. It's a good thing. Now lastly, understand the pacing of Battle Brothers. It's a slow game. I find that 365 days in-game typically takes around 75 to 80 hours in-game time. A little bit less if you are using one of the faster mods, but generally, it's about 365 days. It's not uncommon for a lot of players to have campaigns that go into the thousands of days, multiple years, and if you intend to get everything out of a game, which is going to all the super late game content, don't be surprised if you have multiple years of in-game time. So that means that if you have a bad start, or things aren't working out, or you're struggling, or some of your brothers keep dying, you lose key guys, fine, be willing to save scum, but the other side of that coin is be understanding of the fact that you can recover a lot of the time. And in the fullness of a 2,000 plus day campaign, if it goes that long, losing one brother or misleveling once in the first 50 days, you're going to forget about it. It's not that bad. And if you sit out the first late game classes, for example, that's totally fine. So just think about that. So, mods. You might be surprised to know that I would recommend that even for brand new players, I do think there are some mods that it's worth having. I say that because I'm playing almost entirely modded campaigns now, and looking back, a number of these mods are ones that I wish I had active right from the start. These are mostly quality of life mods and mods that make sense, within the internal logic of the game. A quick note on the Legends mod. I won't be covering this now in this discussion. I will have a whole separate video on the Legends mod sometime in the future. But let's look at some of the specific mods that I think you might enjoy using. To get a link to all these mods, look in the description. There's a link to Filthy Robot's channel. Shout out to Filthy Robot, another incredible Battle Brothers content creator. Follow the link. You will get a link in his video to a Google document, which is also in my Discord. We'll link also in the description. But go check out Filthy's content. He's also excellent. The first mod is called Faster with Pause. So in the usual unmodded version of the game, you have 1 time speed, which is like this, 2 times speed, like that. But this mod allows you to advance time up to 3 times, and even 4 times, like this. Now this is super important because, as you've just shown here, split second the game gets another enemy group into vision, the game pauses. This is super important because it's going to stop you from blundering into enemy groups. The worst case scenario is you're a low level band of brothers, you're crossing a forest, and you blunder straight into a bandit ambush, and this mod will allow that to stop happening. It's incredibly useful, and I can't recommend it enough. The last thing to talk about is it's not just on the world map, it's also in combat. If we just go into combat here, you'll see that the animations are sped up quite noticeably as well. You can see here with these direwolves, they're flying quite quickly across the screen. This is particularly important, I feel, when you're fighting huge hordes of zombies. If you find yourself fighting a group of 35 plus zombies, once the zombies start their turn, without this mod, you can just as well go pour yourself a cup of tea and come back while the animations play out. So very, very useful mod. Next mod I recommend you use is the tryout mod. So in the unmodded version of the game, you click on tryout and it tells you what traits the brother has. It has iron lungs, anemic, dastard, and like that. But it doesn't tell you anything about the talents, which is where their stars are allocated. Now, the tryout mod does double the cost of trying out, but I think it's well worth it, because here you can see Gustav the Courier. Okay, he's got the disloyal trait, but he's got hit points, he's got initiative, he's got melee skill, and it's just very, very useful. And it's a little quality of life that mod that I think makes a lot of sense within the game's internal logic. I mean, you put into a town, some guys want to join you, you pay them a little bit of a stipend to put them through their paces, and your sergeant will assess them along these lines, rather than just telling, oh, he's got iron lungs. How is he with a melee weapon? What kind of a sergeant would do that? So that makes a lot of sense. Great mod. Next up is the Nimble Tool. So the Nimble Tool mod shows the effective hit point values for any brother that has the Nimble perk. Now the Nimble perk increases your hit point pool basically by making sure that you only take a percentage of damage that you would be done. Read the description, you'll get to know it, and also we'll cover this in my discussion of perks. But nimble perk mod shows you effective hit points between the body effective hit points, the head effective hit points, and it gives you an average of effective hit points. You use this then by taking the armor, which is the armor value and the maximum fatigue. If you switch it out for something that, for example, has a lot more armor but it's also way more fatigue, as you can see, even though I've increased the amount of armor, I've actually lowered the effective hit points because it's lowered the damage reduction to hit points. It's very, very useful for calculating how to get the most out of your nimble perk. Next up, we have the Scoutable Locations mod. So what this does is adds extra detail on what you can see in a ruin. In the unmodded version of the game, here it would just say lots of orc young, whereas here the mod defines lots as a number between 11 and 13. You'll also notice that in the description there it says in brackets orcs, so you know there's orcs in there, but obviously that's obvious because you can see there lots of orc young. And it also gives you the chance that there might be a named item in there. Now there is one thing to note about this mod though, and that is that not all locations will give you the exact type of enemy that's in there. Some of them can't be fully scouted, such as Guardians keep ruins here. We know there's orcs in there, but we don't know what kind or how many, and that is totally fine, I think. Another very good quality of life mod. Last but not least, we have the Town Events Detail mod. What this does is, that's what it says, it gives you more detail on what town events are and how they affect the village. In the unmodded version, it would just give you the description, but it wouldn't give you that detail about buying items for 25% less, selling them for 25 more, and 50% less recruits are available. Very, very useful for helping you to figure out when you should be buying items and when you should be selling them. This is something that we'll touch on a little bit later when it comes to economy, but generally speaking, you want to be buying items wherever you can find them the cheapest, obviously. That's affected by a bunch of things, but you want to be selling items in big cities like this. Big cities are the ones that have these pink tiled roofs, whereas smaller villages have these thatched roofs. Anyway, yeah, another good little mod. Okay, let's get started with some actual in-game advice now. So let's just say you go ahead and start a new campaign. If you are new to the game, I just suggest that you start with this rebuilding a company, because it includes a tutorial. Battle Brothers, Late Game Crisis, whatever this, you know, as to your own preferences. Whatever it is. Okay, next. Now, as far as economic difficulty is concerned, if you're brand new to the game, please just start everything with beginner, because it's just going to help you learn, and there's nothing wrong with that. Later on and on, you can tweak these higher and higher. I personally play on expert combat and only veteran economic. I don't like going to expert economic because I find that that only amplifies the aspects of the game that I enjoy the least. But of course, that's all personal preference, and that's up to you. Quick thing to notice about this start, you begin in a battle against a few little enemy raiders. You know, it gives you the quest to go after Hoggart. But notice that in this first battle, your brothers can't die. So don't worry about how it goes. Well, obviously these two get killed as part of this, you know, it plays out, but these guys can't actually die. But anyway, so you get through this little battle, and you find yourself on the world map. Now, the first thing I recommend you do, and it's the first thing I do whenever I start any campaign, into the village, but let's talk about analyzing the world map and what that means for your campaign as a whole. So first thing you do is zoom all the way out and take a look at the map that's been generated. Notice how a lot of the place that's covered by fog of war is typically either far to the east or far to the west. That tends to not matter too much, but what does matter is the split between the various noble houses. And we want to check where the economic resources are and how that's going to affect you. Like looking at this map, for example, it isn't split by a large body of water, so that makes things quite a lot easier to get around, and there aren't any cities that are off on little islands, which can be a bit of a pain. If you find a map, for example, that has like a big body of water splitting it up in the middle and the roads going around it, the downside is it can take forever to take the long way around the road. But on the plus side, the map, when calculating caravan escort missions or delivery missions, can calculate using the roads only. And then, for example, if you have, let's say between these two cities you have a big body of water, the game might calculate it as taking 4 days and pay you more accordingly, but you can find a quick way over just by walking off the road, and then you turn what is supposed to be 4 days worth of trek into only one, and you make a bit of profit out of it. But I digress. Now start zooming into each individual city and take a look at the buildings around it. Wheat fields mean that you're likely to get bread there at a cheaper price. This is very encouraging to see. A salt mine, this means that this city is going to be producing the salt resource, and you should be able to get it there for quite cheaper. Blast furnace means that armor smiths will have plenty of resources to make armor, so most likely you'll find that there's an armor smith in there and you'll be able to get good and cheap armor there. Goat pens mean there's goat's cheese. Winery means wine. Beekeeper means mead. But the idea here is to take a look at what luxury resources are getting produced where, and then start thinking about your trade routes. Okay, so here is amber. Amber gets produced there. And what do we have there? Surface iron ore veins, that helps with weapons, gets more goat's cheese, more bread. If you get really, really lucky, what you want to find is a gem mine and iron ore and amber. Orchard, so not much. But anyway, when you get onto your first game, just start looking around. The other important thing that you, I think, need to have is make sure that at least one village, typically it's a village that's in the middle of the map near the forests, make sure you have at least one village or city that has a hunter's cabin. A hunter's cabin means it's more likely that you will be able to get poachers and hunters at this particular village. Poachers and hunters are going to be your ranged fighters and archers, and they're incredibly important. And if, like me, you've experienced a playthrough where you just happen to have a map where there aren't any hunters' cabins, you won't be able to find hunters reliably, and it is incredibly frustrating. So this map isn't great with its resources, and I don't see any obvious trade routes, but you know, that might make you want to respin, or it might make you just have to deal with it, but that's fine. Next up, let's talk about getting the most out of your starting funds. If you are starting with beginner and high starting funds, you'll have 2,500 crowns. You return to Volan to get paid. Say yes, we have unfinished business with Hoggart. That will earn you comparatively easy bit of money there. You've already been paid 400. So you're going to have 2,900 gold on you. First thing, go straight to the marketplace and see if the city that you've come to has any trade goods. Now notice that the wine here costs 112, but it's only worth 110. So that's 2 gold above its cost price. That's close enough that we can actually sell it at a major city to make some profit. It's counting that as provisions, but we're going to be selling that in a city. Now, what I recommend you do when you start is aim to get yourself, when you're recruiting brothers, a core group of 6 brothers. You're going to want 3 up front, all of them with militia spears and a shield, and then 3 guys at the back. You'll start with 1 guy who has decent ranged skill. He'll be your archer, and then you're going to hire 2 more guys. Ideally you would want another archer, but that's incredibly rare because they're very expensive. More likely you'll get 2 brothers that have decent skills, and it'll end up being 3 guys with shields and spears, and then 2 guys with pitchforks. Pitchforks are very important in the beginning. The reason they are so important is because they give you increased to-hit modifiers. Like right here we've got a wall fork, and pitchfork, go ahead and buy that. Let's buy the wooden shield because we're going to need that for the front line. Pick up the bandages. Here's a pretty, standard sturdy guy on the front line. Let's go take a look at who there is to hire. We've got 2 refugees, which are terrible. Brawlers are excellent. We don't bother trying him out because he's cheap enough, and he's going to be good enough just to start. Right in the beginning, you just want bodies. Now, at this point, I could talk about strategies of how to level brothers and how to decide who's going to be what, but I'll go into that in detail in a later segment. For now, though, just take this brother, give him a shield. Actually, like, here you go. We need to go to one of the bigger cities to go buy some more weapons and armor. This lad's got good defense, so he'll be fine for the front. Now, very typically, you need to leave this first village and go to the nearest big one. There you go. It's even part of the tutorial because you're meant to do that. Yada yada yada. They charge you more, they get grumpy, we understand that. So let's talk about some classes you should be thinking about right in the beginning. My favorites are farmers because they get plus fatigue and plus hit points, making them nice and tough. Butchers can be very good as well. Butchers get plus melee skill and plus resolve. Now, brawlers are excellent. They get plus melee skill and plus resolve. Day tailors, I don't believe get any additional stats, but they tend to not get any negative ones either, so they're pretty damn good. And then backgrounds like a monk, a flagellant, or a gravedigger tend to be weaker fighters, but they get a lot higher resolve bonuses. So those are prime candidates for a bannerman. And we want to try and get one of your starting 6 to be someone who's going to carry your banner and just have super high resolve. If I was looking here, I would just buy this farmhand on site. He even comes with a little pitchfork. Messengers actually can be pretty good because they get a lot of extra fatigue, but I'm going to try him out because I want to see what he has first. Fatigue, melee skill, and ranged skill, and he's loyal. Fine, why not? Here's our starting 6. Heinrich, loads of fatigue, loads of melee skill. He'll be an amazing frontline tank, so we'll chuck him on the front line. Humbert, not great starting stuff, but let's put him on the back line as a pitchfork user because he isn't as great defensively. Now we're just going to get armor for all of these nerds. Excuse me, lads. Your guys are lads, enemies are nerds. Very important bit of terminology. Generally you will find cheaper weapons and armor in the general marketplace, and buying weapons and or armor from an armorer or a weaponsmith in the beginning is a lot more pricey. I tend to find that the best price point for value in the beginning is a keton caps for the head, and if you can find them, the padded leather. It looks like the Roman padded leather. This time we've been a little unfortunate and we couldn't find any in the village. A lot of times you'll find armor that is in a lower state of disrepair, like this basic mail shirt. For 450 gold I would absolutely recommend buying it. That's most of our gold, but remember we've got this wine and mead that we're going to sell for profit. So what do we need? Let's just outfit the lads here. Let's go. Who's our best fighter up front? That would be Conrad, so we give him basic mail and that. On our shopping list we still need just 2 more spears and then we're pretty much good to go. The guys in the back line don't have such great armor, but that's fine. If we play correctly with our tactics, they shouldn't get caught to melee range at all. Need 1 more spear and we're good to go. If we run out of money and we really have to, we could even give that other frontline guy just this bludgeon, and in fact I'm going to do that. I'm selling the woodcutter's axe because right from the start I tend to not use two-handed weapon users right from the start. Defense and just keeping the guys alive is the most important thing. Later on, when you're more experienced, by all means you can actually use two-handed guys from the start, but you've got to be very careful and you have to protect them. A quick note on this helmet here on my archer. This is the Fangshire, which if you bought I believe it's the supporters edition, you start with the Fangshire. Fangshire is 60 head armor, only -5 maximum fatigue, but crucially it lets the brother wearing it see at night without any ranged combat bonuses, so very, very important. If you happen to have that version of the game, I recommend you use the Fangshire. So now you've got a group of 6 lads and you're ready to start taking missions, but what missions should you look to do? First of all, you got to complete this little Hoggart mission, which is easily done, and now we are out on the map by ourselves, ready to do whatever we want and find our fortune. From that little Hoggart fight, you'll typically get a weapon or 2 extra. And we'll go ahead and give Conrad the falchion. Now, a brief note on weapon types and which ones I recommend you use early on. Clearly, spears are one of the best, if not the best, early game weapon, and the reason here is because of because of weapon attack modifiers. Each weapon type has attack modifiers. Spears have a plus 20% chance to hit, turning this 55% chance to hit into a 75% chance to hit, assuming of course there are no other modifiers like the enemy wearing a shield and having innate defense. Spears also allow you to put down a spear wall, very good, we'll talk about that in detail a little bit later. And of course the wooden shield is giving you knockback and shield wall. Just one thing to quickly note about shield wall is that it's more effective if you have brothers standing next to each other using shield wall. The shield wall gives you 15 melee defense for 1 turn and 15 range defense, but you get an additional +5 defense against all attacks for each ally adjacent, also using shield wall. So in a 3-person formation like this, if they all use shield wall, the guy on the outside will get +15 for himself and +5 from the brother next to him, whereas the one in the middle will get +15 for himself and +5 from each for a total of +25 melee defense. Damn good. Okay, so spears are +20 to hit, swords with slash are +10% chance to hit, blunt weapons inflict 10 extra fatigue, so you can beat down enemies and make them tired quite quickly. Flails bypass the defensive bonuses conferred by shields. Axes allow you to use break shield to obviously break a shield, would you believe it. Warhammers have smite for extra armor damage. And what else am I forgetting? Cleavers, if inflict bleeding damage over time, so really quite good. And let's dig into the weapon types a little bit later on. But for our purposes now in the beginning, I recommend you use spears. Personally, when my brothers are super low level, if their melee skill is below 65, I'll use a spear. Once they hit 65, they can start using a sword, and once their melee skill is 70 and above, then I'll start letting them use other weapons that don't have a plus hit modifier. The logic being that better to do less damage more often than more damage far less often. Bear in mind, of course, that these spears do the least base damage, and they don't do a lot of damage to armor, but in the beginning it can be too much for the difficulty. So, it's day 2, you defeated Hogarth, and you are presented with this screen. Which ambition to choose first? Personally, I recommend that you go straight for the We Need Allies ambition. It's one of the easier ones, and rushing straight up to 12 brothers is, I think, a mistake. Anyone who's played the peasant start will tell you that starting with that many brothers on the field comes with probably more disadvantages than advantages. It costs a lot more to keep them in the field. All the XP after each battle is getting split 12 ways rather than 6 ways, so your guys level up slower. It's not great. For your first few ambitions, I would recommend that you take the become friendly with a village first, then take the 2,000 gold for a battle standard, then get the name a sergeant. Then there is the your feet are itchy for the open road, which is visit each village on the map. A quick note on that ambition: if you have visited, let's see, for you to be able to get that ambition, the visit every village ambition, there needs to be at least 3 villages not visited. So in that time, these first 30 days, I would look to visit each one of these villages except for those 3. Just bear that in mind. Once you've done that one, then it should give you the option to find a ruin and raid it, which seems quite scary, but if you could just find a little hut with a collapsed roof just with some zombies in, that's enough for you to be able to get that ambition. And after having done all those ambitions, check your relations here. You should have gone by then from unknown to just about 1,000, and you need 1,060 to be able to get professional renown, which allows you to then start doing work for the noble houses. So after you've done friendship ambition, battle standard, sergeant, itchy feet, raid a ruin, you can then get work for the noble houses, but then you'll be well and off. So that's the ambitions. Now it's day 2. You can find yourself being given a number of mission types. So let's see what we get given here. We get given go after the golden talisman, follow the tracks, return the talisman, or follow the tracks, return the thing. These are excellent missions. I need time to think. And then this is a every square secured desolate mausoleum. These are 2 excellent starting battles. I recommend you do these, go follow the tracks and fight, because especially if it's a 1 skull, it's not going to be that difficult. So the skull rating indicates difficulty. 1 skull being the easiest, 2 being harder, 3 being exceptionally difficult. Right early on, I would say be quite happy to take on 1 and 2 skull missions if they relate to fights, but leave the 3 skull fights for when you are feeling a little bit stronger. I recommend early on try to take delivery missions, because very often that doesn't involve you having to fight, and especially if you've just had a fight mission where some guys are hurt or your armor needs repairing, instead of just camping and advancing time and letting your armor getting repaired and your guys heal, if you can find a delivery mission that'll take 2 days, well, just, spend that time delivering something. Your guys will still get healed, the armor still gets fixed, and you've made some money in that time rather than just having advanced time and essentially wasted that time. The go somewhere and find the place missions are also very, very good. Just be certain to read the descriptions that it gives you, because it gives you a hint of where the thing is. Those are quite nice, especially because let's say if we get given a mission here saying find the graveyard to the west. If you find the graveyard to the west, that can be doubly useful, because it can then allow the nearby village to spawn a go to the place, get the thing mission. These go to the place, find the thing missions are particularly good because you don't have to fight, and they can keep spawning over and over again from one village. So here we've been told to obtain the fingerbone of Sir Gerhard, ruins of Orkbane Keep. What you do is you are going to be proccing the mission and then running away. Now bear in mind that that is going to lower the morale of any of the guys who have retreated. So just leave one guy in the party, go in there, just make sure what it says, finding and bagging the finger bone of Sir Gerhard, easier than expected. Bombs. Just go ahead and hit auto retreat. One brief note with auto retreat: when you have a full group of 12 or so brothers and there is variable height behind you, just be very, very careful using auto retreat, because the AI can get a little bit funny and can cause your brothers to get caught out by the enemy. And maybe just retreat manually until you're halfway there and then use auto retreat. As you can see, return to Hemeln. Everybody back into the fight here. And get paid 330 gold in total for, just an hour or two's work. Quick and easy. Very, very good. And as I said, the nice thing is we've still left ruins of Orkbane Keep, so every few days or the next time you happen to come past Hemeln, there's a chance you can go back there and just repeat the process. And if you get super lucky, the difficulty of the go to the place, fetch the thing mission is 3 skulls. You can even find yourself getting paid 1500 gold for just going to a place, sending one lad in, grab the thing, and go straight out. Also bear in mind though that those missions can give you a choice. As you go in there, it says, okay, you found the thing easy enough, but you'll notice that there is one of the higher tier undead weapons in there, which is a war scythe, a crypt cleaver, or some other one, a kopesh. If you decide to snatch the weapon, there's a chance, I think it's a 25% chance you get the thing and the weapon, you get out scot-free, or there's a 75% chance that if you grab the weapon, you get ambushed and you have to flee. That then means you get the weapon, but you then fail the mission. So just think very carefully about how much you're getting paid to do it, and the value of the weapon that you're being offered and how much you want it. But that's a calculation you should make yourself. As you move around the world map, you'll start getting these random events popping up. These sort of things, and depending on how you answer them, will affect your reputation as either a good guy or a bad guy, and that reputation affects what type of missions you get offered generally. Like here, you find a drunk lad, decide to rob him, or even be, let's say, rob him. We get ourselves some crowns, a signet ring, and valuable furs. Quite nice. So we're going to make a bit of money. But our relations to House Berengar have suffered because that guy belonged to House Berengar. All things for you to think about. Let's see here. So House Berengar, that pissed them off. Rumored to have robbed a family member of the road. Benefits and costs. But the thing is, if you look at the noble houses, I think it's a good idea for you to not fall into the trap of trying to get allied with all 3 houses. Bear in mind that eventually the noble war, civil war, will happen, and you're going to have to declare for one of the houses, which is going to piss off 2 of the other houses. But this has relevance to the mission types that we're just talking about now, because I would encourage you to take on escort missions that you might think could be a bad idea. And the reason being is that escort missions do pay quite nicely. I think there's an escort mission here at Sea Dock. One of the tracks. No. But let's say I get offered an escort mission, 2 days to the north, and it pays quite nicely. Bear in mind that while you're escorting the caravan, it doesn't cost you any provisions, and you probably will get attacked, but heck, you might not. It has happened to me before where, like, within the first week, I've accepted a 3 skull mission that's taking me 3 days to the north. The payment they offered was like 1500 gold, and I thought, well, why not? And as it turned out, I didn't get attacked, it didn't cost me any food, and I got a nice huge cash injection. But that's the exception. The norm is that you either have to fight, but if you can't fight, just flee. It's totally fine. It will upset the village that gave you the mission, but in the greater scheme of things, it shouldn't be the end of the world, especially if you assume that the village that gave you the mission is sitting at neutral. You generally have to fail 2 missions before they go from cold to openly hostile. So you can fail 1 mission and they'll still give you jobs, although they'll pay a little less. So be more willing to take on escort missions, but don't be afraid to abandon them. One other reason, but this is more relevant much later in the game, when you have plenty of money to burn, and you get given an escort mission that's taking you to a city that is built up and has, for example, a weaponsmith or an armorer, if you're fortunate, the escort mission will be a supply convoy rather than a trading convoy. If it's a supply convoy, it'll then give the city well supplied, and then the weaponsmith and the armorer will have a huge amount of weapons for a good price, And if you have the money saved up, you can buy legendaries quite reliably that way, and that's one of the better ways to get legendaries later on in the game. So, you're a week in, you are doing those particular mission types, you are returning things for villages, you are getting into smaller fights, but a brief note on particular enemy types and how to handle them. Now, right in the beginning, you're going to have a pretty small band of lads with only, one archer, and if you're lucky, you'll have the Fangshire. Now, regardless of whether you have the Fangshire or not, when you are fighting enemy types that have ranged fighters of their own, it's incredibly important that you fight them at night. Nighttime will give a minus 30% to ranged skill of the enemy archers, and a lot of the times the AI will then force them to walk forward, and instead of all the enemies standing back and expecting you to come towards them, which is a slaughter 9 times out of 10, they will start coming to you, maybe even halfway across the screen, and you can just move in and engage them that way. So, until you are strong enough to have 2 or even 3 highly experienced archers of your own, by highly experienced, I'd say they have about 80 ranged skill, they have bullseye, they have bow mastery. Once you have at least 2 guys like that, and frontline that have kite shields that can keep them safe from archers, at that point you can then outshoot most enemy marksmen. You might still take a few hits, but you can fairly reliably outshoot them. At that point, then you can take them on during the day, because then it's gonna help you to do it then. But until then, and bear in mind, this could take up to 150 days for you to get those archers. That's not uncommon. You're going to be fighting against enemy ranged guys at night, so be prepared to do that. In these first 30 days, you want to be fighting thugs for the most part. Wiedergängers, if they're not in too large numbers and you have the spears, can be reliable, good XP. But wherever you come across regular Wiedergängers and armored Wiedergängers in not too large numbers, you should be rushing towards them and fighting them if you can, because that's a very good, very reliable source of XP for you in the early game. Once the game gets to around about 3 or 4 weeks on, you'll notice that the groups of what were just thugs will start becoming mixed groups of thugs and raiders. At that point, hopefully, your lads will be approaching level 3 or 4 or 5. That's a key point in your first 30 days then, because that is going to hopefully allow you to start armor farming and weapon farming. Bear in mind, of course, that raiders have better gear and better weapons than the thugs do. You want to kill those raiders and take weapons for yourselves, but it's going to allow you to start using daggers to stab down enemies to get that armor. Let's talk about that in detail. So, here's one of my late game test groups that I'm going to use to show you the principle that you're going to be using even earlier on to try to farm armor. So, all armor has an amount of hit points, noted there by untouched. And the way the drop rate works in Battle Brothers, and it's embarrassing how long it took me to figure this out, is the percentage of hit points that the armor piece has is roughly tied to the percentage chance that you will get that armor at the end of the battle. So if we either were to hit this guy in the head and kill him that way without touching his body armor, I believe if armor is at 100% repair, there's a 95% chance you will get the armor. And the same applies to weapons. Now, as the enemy attacks you, they wear down their own weapons, so there's less and less chance that you get that weapon. So if you encounter an enemy that has a particularly good weapon that you want to make sure you take him down as quick as you can, or keep him stun locked so that he can't damage his own weapon. You notice there that I killed that brigand. He dropped his spear because he didn't get to hit anybody, so undamaged. Now, if we look here, I hit his head and I hit his leather armor for 35 damage, so there's less of a chance I'll get that armor. Let's say, for example, I especially want to get this guy's armor, and this is the kind of tactic that you're going to be employing in the beginning. You're going to get someone to go into contact with him, put their shield up, keep him busy while you slaughter everybody else, and you surround the guy whose armor you want, and you get all your guys on the front line who you were already smart enough to give either daggers as their main weapon if they are a dagger specialist, or daggers as their secondary weapon if they are some other weapon specialist. Surround the guy and just stab him down. So let's see then what that look like at the end. Okay, so the battle unfolds. You kill everybody else. You identify the person whose armor you want. Surround him with lads who all have daggers, and just dagger him down. And then as you'll see in the post-game screen, we managed to get the armor that he was wearing. As it happens, we got the other guy's armor, but I think I've made the point. Now, there is a perfectly valuable counter-argument to this, which is that it's cheaper to only buy armor rather than daggering guys down because of the risk involved. I happen to not agree, because I think that it's not quite that simple. There is a calculation to be made. You can get yourself in a situation where you are exposing yourself to unnecessary risk. Let's say I'm going in here and I see there's two leaders in there, and now the leaders typically have better gear and I want to try to dagger that gear down. It is true to say that if in the attempt of trying to just keep that leader busy while you kill everybody else, that leader then does so much damage or even kills a brother that it wouldn't be worth it even if you get his armor, and that's true to say. However, if you play your tactics right, you use nets, you keep him busy with a brother who has high melee defense so that he can't hurt them like that. At the end of the day, as long as you suffer less damage to armor and brothers, so let's say you suffer 100 hit points or 100 armor points of damage, that will cost you, for argument's sake, 250 gold worth of tools to repair that armor. As long as the armor you get from it for daggering your enemy down and exposing your brother to that risk is worth more than what you would have spent to repair the armor for the damage that you suffered, then it's worth it. So I get the idea about there being risk in it, but if you do it safely and reasonably, it's one of the best ways to get weapons and armor in the game, and I can't recommend that you do it enough. And that brings us to the end of episode 1. In episode 2, we'll look at weapon types, armor types, the various modifiers that each apply, and that should lead us quite nicely then into a discussion of the various builds that I like to use, such as shield specialist tanks, two-handed weapon using raiders, archers, bannermen, and the like. Then we will look at hiring new brothers and which of the aforementioned builds to assign them to based on the talents that they have. We'll also look at how to calculate where you can expect their various stat ranges to end up with. Later on in the series, we will look at very, very specific and very in-depth combat tactics, waiting, when to attack, terrain, how terrain affects them, all of the various enemy types, and then even further we will look at the super late game content, like the story missions, the Black Monolith, the Sea of Tents, DLC content, and all the rest. I hope you've all found this useful, or at least enjoyable. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below, or follow the link to my Discord. We're a small but growing group of lads there. Always happy to talk Battle Brothers. So again, hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. It helps me more than you can know. Thanks very much, and see you next time.